Vladimir Putin's most famous critic has been found in one of Russia's most remote prisons. Alexei Navalny is, quote, doing well despite being at a penal colony in Siberia known as Polar Wolf. That's according to his legal team's spokesman. That prison is nearly 2,000 miles from where Navalny was held before. The 47-year-old opposition leader had been missing since December 11th, and his team said he'd never been, quote, hidden for so long before. Navalny missed 2 scheduled court appearances last week. His years-long protest of Putin was the subject of a CNN film and HBO Max documentary that won an Oscar this year. CNN's Nada Bashir is covering the latest for us from London. Nada, do we know why Navalny was moved in the first place?
Look, Jessica, there still isn't very much clarity on why exactly he was moved. We are still getting more details as to the conditions he is facing and how Navalny was moved from that penal colony some 150 miles east of Moscow now to where he has been located in the northwestern Siberia region, as you mentioned, in that colony known as the Polar Wolf penal colony. And there has been widespread concern over Navalny's safety and security over the last 2 weeks since his legal team and other associates lost contact entirely with the Kremlin critic. We have now had confirmation from his spokesperson that his lawyer was able to meet with him today to confirm his location at this penal colony. And we have seen a statement now from the director of Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation giving some details around the penal colony that he is currently being held in just a few short hours ago, saying Navalny is in colony IK3 in Kharp called Polar Wolf, one of the northernmost and most remote colonies. The conditions there are harsh, with a special regime in the permafrost zone. It is very difficult to get there, and there are no letter delivery systems. Now, of course, while this has come as a relief to have the confirmation of Navalny's location after 2 weeks of his whereabouts being unknown, there is still deep-seated concern over the conditions he may face at this penal colony. Navalny was, of course, sentenced back in August of this year to 19 years in prison over extremism-related charges. These are charges, of course, that he has repeatedly denied. He had already been serving 11 and a half years for other charges that he had been accused of, including fraud and corruption. These are charges and allegations that his legal team say have been put against him with political motivation, an attempt, they say, to stifle Navalny's criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Navalny, of course, a well-known prominent figure in critiquing both Putin and the Kremlin. He has organized anti-government demonstrations in the streets of Moscow. He has, of course, been quite vocal on his blog and social media in outlining alleged corruption within the Kremlin. And he has been perhaps the most prominent and most challenging threat to Vladimir Putin's legitimacy as leader of Russia. This has been a huge, of course, focus for many of his team, his whereabouts. Now, the focus will continue to be ensuring that he is safe, but also, of course, they continue to demand that he is released.
All right, Nada Bashir for us with the latest from London on that. Thanks so much for that reporting. And a warning for you now, some disturbing video we're going to show you in the latest update of the Israel-Hamas war. These are some of the victims after a deadly 24 hours in central Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 250 people were killed from Israeli strikes. 70 of the victims were at the Al-Maghazi refugee camp Sunday. Israel Defense Forces told CNN, quote, in response to Hamas's barbaric attacks, the IDF is operating to dismantle Hamas military and administrative capabilities. Also today, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Gaza, his second trip to the battlefield, vowing to continue the, quote, long fight, a day after promising to intensify the campaign against Hamas. The IDF says since Friday, at least 15 of its soldiers have been killed in Gaza. CNN senior international correspondent Will Ripley is in Tel Aviv. Will, tell us more about what the Prime Minister said to troops today during that visit to Gaza.
Well, he's certainly there to send them encouragement, to say that their sacrifice, this was one of the deadliest weekends in this 80-day war for the Israeli military, just like it was one of the deadliest 24-hour periods in Gaza since this war began back on October 7th. 80 days, and you have more than 20,600 people who have been killed on the Palestinian side, along with more than 53,000 injuries. And even though Israel's death toll is much lower, they do say that they are adhering, Jessica, to international law, that they are not indiscriminately targeting civilians, but they're going after specific military targets based on intelligence. They say they're targeting changes as different intelligence comes in. And they say the fact that Hamas is choosing to position itself in areas densely packed with civilians who are sheltering, civilians who are displaced, that makes Hamas just as culpable for this skyrocketing death toll. This is the Israeli argument, as it does Israel itself. So despite that we had this UN resolution last week that, of course, was quite watered down from the original draft that the United States vetoed, and then there were several delays as they were rewriting it, Israel says they're not going to stop until they obtain their objective, which is to eliminate the leadership of Hamas, and they have not been able to do that yet. Netanyahu in northern Gaza, where they have essentially obtained operational control, meeting with the troops and saying that this war will continue. President Biden, in a phone call with the Prime Minister of Israel, encouraging a more slower, more focused, streamlined technique, not such a large-scale casualty type of situation. President Biden, speaking with Democratic donors, did on one instance use the word indiscriminate bombing, which would be a violation of international law. But then the Israelis really said that one reference from the U.S. president is not reflective of their reality on the ground. And so the fighting absolutely continues. And you have a Christmas Day where we have now just had some of the deadliest incidents since this war began 80 days ago.
And Will, before we let you go, the IDF has also revealed these new details about the Hamas tunnel network that they've been trying to destroy and penetrate there. What can you tell us about that?
So this is a network of tunnels underneath Gaza. Hamas has publicly stated in the past that they've built hundreds of miles of tunnels under Gaza, although the exact number of the tunnels is unknown and impossible to independently verify. But what Israel says they discovered and uncovered is a very elaborate tunnel system, very high tech, with capability to house weapons facilities, bunkers, command headquarters, even living quarters, apartments for the Hamas senior leadership. And they also say that they recovered the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages, 3 of them soldiers, 2 of them civilians. And once those 5 bodies were recovered and repatriated back here to Israel, that underground tunnel complex that was housing the Hamas leadership and a lot of the leadership operations was destroyed. Of course, the leadership has since moved on to another location, Jessica, Israel trying to track them down. But this is a fight that experts say is likely to continue for many, many months to come, because Hamas is actually getting more resources funneled in from their supporters, amongst whom they've actually gained credibility since October 7th for keeping this fight going. And so they're going to get more money, they're going to get more weapons, and Israel says they're going to have to keep fighting.
Will Ripley for us tonight in Tel Aviv. Thanks so much for that reporting, Will. We appreciate it. And joining us now to talk a little bit more about this is retired Army Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. Thanks so much for being here on this Christmas Day. We really do appreciate it. I want to start first with some of Will's reporting there. We know that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israeli forces are intensifying, that's his word, operations inside the Gaza Strip. What do you think an intensification looks like at this point?
Well, I think it means probably putting more ground troops in to finish up the fight inside of Gaza City, more ground troops to finish the fight in Han Yunis. I think it also means that they may step up the amount of air attacks that are going into both of those cities, because I think that they recognize that international criticism cannot continue at this level. So the sooner they mop this up, sooner they clean this up, the better. And candidly, that saves lives by speeding it up, simply because you won't be fighting as many days when you hear casualty tolls of 250 plus.
And his statement, Benjamin Netanyahu's statement, is coming after the Secretary of State Antony Blinken said last week that this conflict, quote, needs to move to a lower intensity phase. So obviously opposite there. You mentioned international support and outside support for Israel. What do you anticipate the U.S. support for Israel is going to look like as we continue moving forward?
Well, look, these types of operations consume a significant amount of ammunition, a significant amount of bombs, significant amount of artillery rounds. I think we will continue to provide those assets, which, oh, by the way, we are also and need to continue to provide to Ukraine. I certainly hope that part of those ammunition packages include precision-guided weapons so that the Israelis can be more precise in their attacks.
And let's talk more about the tunnels that Will also kind of walked us through there in his reporting before we came to you. The IDF has this new disclosure about what the tunnel network looks like in Gaza, kind of where they have been able to go, and they also reported the bodies that they found of the 5 Israeli hostages that had been recovered. What are you taking away from this information about these tunnels and what the IDF is finding there?
Well, what it indicates to me is that for many, many years, money that has been provided by the United Nations has been siphoned off to buy the concrete, to buy the sand, to buy the material that is necessary to build these 300 miles of tunnels that had no other purpose than to fight wars. So I think it's not only a criticism of the barbarity of Hamas, but it's an implicit criticism of the UN accounting for the money that they've been providing over the years.
Because you're saying that that's where some of it has gone.
I don't know how else these tunnels could have appeared without the funding necessary, and there's no other real source of funding inside of Gaza except the money provided by the UN and some money that's been provided by Qatar.
And just quickly, lastly, before I let you go, they talked about the 5 bodies of the hostages that were found there. We're now closing in on 3 months in this conflict, and there are still dozens, over 100 hostages that remain in Gaza. Where do you see this going? Does that rely solely on a diplomatic solution, or is there any sort of military intervention that you see coming down the road at all?
I would be very surprised if even the highest end military soldiers inside the special operations community of Israel would be capable of bringing back even a percentage of the hostages. So it will depend on diplomacy. But nonetheless, one of the messages that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave to his troops on the ground is keep fighting. The soldiers need to focus on fighting because they can't depend on diplomacy to fix this. And so they're going to keep fighting until this war is over. That seems to be certain.
All right, Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, thanks so much again. We appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to you.
And to you as well.
Still ahead today, former President Donald Trump asking an appeals court to throw out the federal election interference case against him, claiming his actions were all part of his presidential duties. But will his immunity claim work? Plus, right now, a manhunt underway after a man was killed and a woman wounded at a mall shooting in Central Florida. A suspect has now been identified on that, and we'll have more for you on CNN News Central.
Anderson Cooper 360, weeknights at 8 on CNN.
His efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Over the weekend, his lawyers filed a motion asking the court to toss special counsel Jack Smith's election interference case, arguing Trump cannot be held accountable for things he did while in office. CNN's Caitlin Polantz is joining us now. And Caitlin, what can you tell us about the new filing and then also where things stand with this particular case right now?
Well, Jessica, Donald Trump lost this attempt he had made to toss the charges against him in federal court in Washington related to the 2020 election whenever the question was before the trial judge. And so now everybody's getting their legal arguments on paper for an appeals court who is going to consider whether there is immunity around the presidency, whether Donald Trump can be tried for his alleged crimes after the 2020 election. So what his lawyers argued in their filing over the weekend is that Trump should not be prosecuted for things that he was doing while he was president. And what he says is that what was happening after the election as he was spreading disinformation and wanting to block the transfer of power, that was all part of his official duties as president, questioning the election. Now, the special counsel's office has pushed back very strongly on that, and courts have found that what was happening after the 2020 election was campaigning, electioneering, not something that's part of the presidency. But this question still has to be answered by the appeals court. And Trump's team, they also are putting in some of their typical language that speaks to the politics of the moment as well. They're saying it's a plague on the nation to have a former president being accused of crimes like this, and that it's dangerous for the country for Donald Trump to be going to trial. That trial is set for the beginning of March, but it depends on how fast the appeals court works here and also if the Supreme Court gets involved later down the line.
Right. Those are the key things it seems to really watch as we see the timeline play out. All right, Caitlin Polans for us. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. And joining us now to talk more about all of this is CNN legal analyst Norm Eisen. He served as House Judiciary Special Counsel in Trump's first impeachment trial. Norm, thanks so much for being with us today. Let's just talk first about what you make of Trump's attorneys arguing he has absolute immunity. That's been something across all of his legal problems. It seems that he continues to keep trying to make that case.
It's a very tough argument in American law to say that a president is absolutely immune. There's no legal authority for it. And Judge Chutkan, the trial court judge, threw it out. Looking at the prior history of the panel of the Court of Appeals, the D.C. Circuit that's about to hear this on an extraordinarily fast timeline. It'll be fully briefed, and then we'll have argument on January 9th. That court is likely to throw it out as well. And I think the Supreme Court will look askance at the argument that there's absolute immunity. But Donald Trump's focus is not just on succeeding, it's on burning as much time on the calendar as possible.
Right, because let's just remind everyone that all of these cases, this one in particular, was scheduled to come up first in this year, where we're going to have an election where he is running for president. So it's this incredibly unprecedented kind of situation. So, and we have seen him time and time again try to just delay. Do you think he will be successful in doing that as you kind of follow the parallel track with the primary calendar that's going to kick off January 15th in Iowa?
Well, the odds are, the likelihood is that Donald Trump won't be successful, although we won't know for sure until the Court of Appeals decides, and then it goes up to the Supreme Court. Probably this March 4th trial date for the federal election overturn case brought by Jack Smith is going to slip. And if you had to guess, you would say 60 to 90 days of slippage. Again, no one knows for sure, but that case most likely will go to trial in 2024. The effect of that case slipping means there are other cases that might go first, and that starts with New York DA Alvin Bragg's 2016 election interference case, which is currently set for trial on March 25th. And if the federal case slips for 2020 alleged election interference, then the state case will move in New York for 2016 election interference. And there's two more criminal cases beyond that. So I don't think Donald Trump is avoiding criminal juries in 2024.
Right. It's just a question of exactly when. Back to this particular case with Jack Smith. Trump's lawyers have been claiming that he can't be prosecuted for election interference because he was never convicted by the U.S. Senate, which obviously did not impeach him in that impeachment trial. What do you make of that argument?
That's a silly argument. Donald Trump has two arguments here. One is that a president is absolutely immune for any official acts. That's wrong, but there's an argument to be had there. The claim that the Constitution, when it says that you can be prosecuted if you're a president after an impeachment, means that you have to be convicted in the impeachment trial before you can be prosecuted. That's turning the language of the Constitution upside down. I handled the first impeachment. That's not what it says. That impeachment first argument is silly. It's frivolous. It's wrong. And that's not going to slow anybody down.
All right. Well, more to come in 2024. Norm, I think you'll be very busy. We'll see you a lot here on CNN. Thanks so much for being with us. I like your nutcracker decor in the background there. Very festive. It's good to see you.
Special for today. Thanks very much.
Thanks. When we come back, thousands of migrants are making their way from southern Mexico to the U.S. border in the largest migrant caravan that we've seen in over a year. America's top diplomat will be in Mexico this week to try to address this unprecedented surge, and we're going to have a live report from the border for you next. Also, a heartwarming story on this Christmas Day. A stray dog that survived in the wild after going missing for nearly 7 years has now been rescued. We'll have more on Rose's incredible journey when we come back. Are marching toward the U.S. southern border. It is the largest caravan the U.S. has seen in over a year, and it may only add to the crisis facing border officials right now. Caravan organizers are calling it, quote, the exodus of poverty. CNN's Rafael Romo is watching what's unfolding in Eagle Pass, Texas. Rafael, what do you know about the caravan we're describing here, and how are officials preparing for this?
Yeah, hi, Jessica. It's a caravan that departed the Pachula, the city at the border with Guatemala and Mexico, and it's thousands of migrants that are coming this way. And like you said before, they're going to add to the numbers that we are already seeing here in this part of South Texas. And you can probably see behind me how thousands of migrants have spent their Christmas Day so far. This is a holding area once the migrants cross the warm during the weekend, but it's cold and windy today, and that's why Border Patrol agents have provided them with Mylar blankets. On the other side, and we cannot forget about this, you have Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection agents, as well as local law enforcement, who are overwhelmed and under a lot of pressure, Jessica, and also spending Christmas Day away from family and loved ones because they're badly needed here. Federal authorities reported a 7-day average of more than 9,600 migrant encounters or apprehensions along the U.S. southern border in December, according to a Homeland Security official. As we have previously reported, that figure is among the highest amounts ever recorded. And officials with CBP also say that during the month of November, nearly 250,000 people were encountered by Border Patrol on the southwest border. I spoke with a woman from Cuba who says she was robbed and kidnapped in Mexico before getting to the border. In spite of all that, she told us she feels blessed this Christmas.
That I'm going to spend it with my family, that I'm going to live in a free country, that at least, I don't know, I'm going to be happy because I'm going to live in a free country where the rights of citizens are respected. That wasn't the case where I lived. I was under a lot of pressure.
And Jessica, Duarte has already reunited with family and is now in Houston. We ran into another woman from Cuba who reunited with her husband for the first time in 5 years. They have a daughter who came along and was hugging her father for the first time in half a decade. As you can imagine, a very Merry Christmas indeed for that family. Back to you.
And Rafael, you mentioned the federal agents, of course, that are there. What kind of impact is the surge having on local law enforcement?
It is tremendous. I was talking to Sheriff Tom Schmerber from Maverick County, which encompasses the area where we are, Eagle Pass, and he was telling me that he has 30 deputies for a very large area, and he says that they have enough local problems to deal with when it comes to crime, when it comes to protecting the community. If you add the thousands and thousands of migrants that have come here, and also it is just not enough. And he was saying that they're not getting enough help, the help they need from the federal government. And they had last week to escort a couple of buses. CBP was transporting a number of migrants to Laredo. They had to provide that support, and it was just very, very difficult for them. Jessica.
No, the president has spoken with Mexico's president about doing something about this, stemming the flow of migrants, and they have agreed more enforcement is needed. And Secretary of State Tony Blinken headed down to Mexico soon to talk more about this. Rafael Romo for us in Eagle Pass, Texas. Thanks so much for that update. And let's go now to some of the other headlines that we're watching this hour. Police in Florida have issued an arrest warrant for a suspect in that weekend shooting at an Ocala mall. Albert J. Shell Jr. is still on the run, but will be charged with premeditated first-degree murder and attempted premeditated first-degree murder for killing one man and injuring a woman during that shooting. Also, it'll be a very Merry Christmas if someone wins tonight's Powerball drawing. The jackpot, now an estimated $638 million. 3 Powerball jackpots were won on Christmas Day. the last time 10 years ago. So maybe we're due. Someone's going to win. And a 12-year-old stray dog was found roaming in an English village and apparently had been missing for nearly 7 years. Her previous owner said she went missing 10 days after they adopted her back in 2017. And they can't take Rose back at this point, but they say they're happy she's safe. They hope she finds a good home. And currently, the organization taking care of Rose is receiving inquiries from people interested in making Rose a part of their family. Just ahead on CNN News Central, 2023 was the year many people finally realized the climate crisis was real. But it didn't seem to be the year that countries around the world faced the reality of what it's going to take to solve the problem. Could 2024 be the year we see real solutions to the threat of climate change? More on that next.
New Year's Eve Live with Anderson and Andy. Live coverage
Extreme storms. 2023 has been an impactful year for the climate. CNN's Simon Cullen explores what some experts are describing as climate collapse and what's being done to turn things around in the future.
Record-breaking wildfires in Canada, deadly floods across large parts of Africa, and polar ice caps in long-term decline.
We are living through climate collapse in real time, and the impact is devastating.
Even before the year was out, scientists had declared with certainty that 2023 would go down as the hottest recorded year in human history.
The year has been quite extraordinary, and myself and many climate scientists have really run out of adjectives to describe the sheer volume of records broken and how they've been broken.
In November, the Earth's average temperature briefly rose more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, a crucial threshold that scientists say could have irreversible consequences.
The evidence is very, very clear. The warmer our world is, the more likely we are to have extreme events, and those extreme events are likely to be more intense and more frequent.
With the El Niño system warming water temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, 2024 could be even hotter. Given the scale of the challenge, many countries were hoping that global climate talks in Dubai would deliver the bold action needed to limit further warming. In the end, the agreement did put a sharper focus on the future of fossil fuels. For the first time in the history of UN-led climate talks, the words fossil fuels appeared in the final text of an agreement, but it only referred to transitioning away, not phasing them out.
The tricky thing is that it's an agreement between basically nearly 200 countries by consensus. So there's always compromises at the end, and that's what leads to disappointment. But I think it's nevertheless a significant moment.
And some countries that claim to take the climate threat seriously are still looking to approve new fossil fuel projects.
There's a lot of hypocrisy to share around. The UK has actually backtracked on its policies. Australia has begun to move forward with its policies to reduce emissions, not succeeding yet. So that's a concern, but it's also proposing and has supported very large expansion to gas export projects and to coal export projects.
However, there are some glimmers of hope. Carbon Brief analysis shows that while China's coal infrastructure has grown, the country has invested so much in renewable energy over recent years that its emissions could actually begin to fall in the year ahead, marking a dramatic turnaround for the world's biggest polluter.
There have been moments in the past where it's looked like China's emissions are coming to a peak. I think there's probably more confidence this time around that we really are seeing a structural shift in their economy.
Analysts say that could be a game changer, not just for China's domestic emissions. It could also give the Chinese leadership extra incentive to push for even stronger global action. Simon Cullen, CNN, London.
A former NBA star's wife is taking on the mission of a lifetime to help inmates in one of the country's most notorious jails. That story next on CNN News Central.
'Twas New Year's night, confetti, streamers, and all that jazz. Here comes our duo, full of pizzazz.
Ooh, it moves. Way too much pizzazz. Come on, Zaddy.
New Year's Eve Live with Anderson and Andy. Live coverage starts at 8 on CNN.
Prisons across the country. CNN's Laura Coates was given an inside look at one of the nation's most notorious jails, Rikers Island, where actress and activist Lala Anthony is giving the gift of hope to inmates, and not just during the holidays.
Today, I'm outside of Rikers Island. It is a detention facility. We're in an area that holds young adults specifically. Now, I've never been inside before. Most people have never been inside of this building. So I'm going to take you inside and show you a little bit about what's going on inside the facility. But also, oftentimes we hear about Rikers Island for all the wrong reasons. Today, I'm going to highlight a particular program that is hoping to help people who are detained inside transition out when they get out. Come with me. The program is called 360.
This is my family.
Led by actress and activist Lala Anthony, and it aims to provide mentorship and re-entry skills to young men behind bars.
This is what makes me happy, and also seeing the changes that are happening, the beautiful things, seeing that when they do come out into society, the changed individuals they become, how they become assets to our community.
Those men, aged 18 to 21, make up almost 10% of the incarcerated population at Rikers. I'm just really intrigued as to what made you begin to do this?
You know, growing up and having different experiences with, people that I cared about being incarcerated and always feeling like, what can I do? Like, I can visit, maybe I couldn't even put money on somebody's books. I just felt helpless. And I finally got in a position where I felt like, no, now I can really make a change. I can really do something. All of our children are one bad decision away from being here, being with the wrong crowd, being led the wrong way. Any of them could be here. And I would hope that there would be someone that would treat my own child with the same love and compassion that I treat these young men with.
How important is that when you have that space?
Everybody needs something like that. It's like a safe haven for real. Like one where you could be honest, open, and be you.
Young men like Darius Lewis. He's been in Rikers since June and is charged with first-degree robbery. Lewis says the 360 program has helped him change the way he sees himself and his future.
It's not just because I'm in jail, because even when I first got here, I was ready to just lash out and just act like another inmate. But it was a program that really showed me, like, I don't have to be what everybody's expecting. Everybody's expecting bad out of me. Everybody's expecting me to be ruthless, but I don't got to be that guy.
Raise your hand if you felt like at some point in your life that you were going to end up in jail. I tell them this is a chapter in your life. This is not your entire life. And what you do with this chapter will determine the rest of your life. So use this time wisely to become a better person, to make change. I never make excuses for them. I tell them that they have to have accountability. They have to own up to whatever it is they did. And they have to pay whatever price it is for what they did. But during that, understanding, having compassion for others. And we're honored to have you with us today.
On this day, Lala led a discussion group where participants examined life circumstances that led them to Rikers.
We come down here, we express what we're going through, whether it's good or bad, and we make the best out of bad situations.
Were you surprised that there was the buy-in from Rikers to do a program like this?
Prior to this, you just only hear the negative. You only hear the negative, and it took me really being here to see so many people that care so much about the population here, care so much about wanting these young men to change and do better with their lives.
You know, for a lot of people, they know Rikers for notorious reasons.
It is difficult. I know what I'm capable of doing. I'm glad that the kids in my program have me as a resource to talk to when dealing with mental health or dealing with struggles. This is jail. This is jail. There's nothing great about being in jail, and they need outlets to express their frustration and their emotions. I can't change the world. I can't change every single person. I can't change every bad thing that's ever happened. I can only do my part.
Looking to bring solutions to a place better known for its history of problems, a monitor appointed by a federal judge highlighted safety concerns at the complex back in October, writing in a report that, quote, high levels of violence and fear among people in custody and staff remain a fact of daily living. And just last week, the Department of Correction was held in civil contempt for failing to tell the monitor about the opening of a restrictive housing unit for inmates accused of setting fires. In response, the department's new commissioner said, while the court found us in contempt, there is an opportunity to purge, and we remain committed to ensuring people are safe and secure in our facilities. I spoke to the commissioner. You wanted to live up to.
You know, I'm recently named commissioner here, and one of the things I really pride myself on is transparency. And I think that if there's something that